Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the first Talk of the Hill podcast. I'm Jeff Aiello. Jill is not here today. She's at work. And we're going to do episode 1 of the Talk of the Hill podcast with just me talking. I'm going to go quick. We're going to go pretty fast. We're going to get through this Range of Light National Monument issue as sort of our kickoff episode today. And then we'll have guests regularly on the program. We are going to cover a wide range of topics. We are going to, and not just topics that are, for necessarily mountain community only topics. The Facebook page that we started after the Creek Fire is called Talk of the Hill. A little background, real quick, so that you understand kind of where we're coming from. First of all, my name is Jeff Aiello. I grew up in Bass Lake, California. Went to Yosemite High School, graduated in 1985. Go Badgers. And I have worked in the television industry since I was 18 years old. I'm 57 years old now. It's all I've ever done my entire life. The Creek Fire happened. We were frustrated with how the local media was covering the fire, which wasn't enough for us at the time. I used a little bit of my experience in storytelling and accessing publicly available websites and whatnot, and having great contacts with firefighters, with CAL FIRE and the Forest Service here locally, to begin doing updates on Facebook Live to help people understand the fire. That went on for several months. Then we kicked off this Talk of the Hill page, which led us to where we are today. We wanted to start a podcast just to try to take the Talk of the Hill experience for our users to a new level. And we weren't really sure when we were going to do that. We were getting close to doing it. And then this Range of Light National Monument thing happened. So we were like, okay, we're not into 100% ready, but let's just do it. So let's just jump in. So thank you for bearing with us on our first episode. And thank you for all the support and all the love out there. I think we have a great community. It gets a little, just like any family, it gets a little raunchy sometimes. It gets a little contentious sometimes, but we try to work through that. We're not perfect. We make mistakes too, and as admins, we've definitely made some errors, and we're trying to always modify what we do. It's a big juggling act for us because we have several full-time jobs, and so this Talk of the Hill page is one of those. We're engaged in it as much as we can be, sometimes more than others, especially like right now with what's going on with this Range of Light National Monument issue. Okay, so let's dive in. That's the setup in case you don't know who I am or why you should care, and maybe you still don't, and that's fine too. But just giving you a little background on who I am, who we are, Jeff and Jill Aiello, and then how we got here. Okay, so diving in, we're going to jump right into the Range of Light National Monument issue. This has been an issue that's been around for a while. A woman named Deanna Wolf started a NPO, nonprofit organization called Unite the Parks. Her objective from the very beginning has been to take the Sierra National Forest boundaries, which sits between Yosemite National Park and Kings Canyon Sequoia National Parks, on the north and south, and is on the east, butts up to the Ansel Adams. I don't think it touches the Inyo Wilderness area. It might, but for certain the John Muir Wilderness. And so it's 1.4 million acres of forest. In my opinion, it's one of the best national forests I've ever been in, and I've been in a lot of them across the country. And I love the Sierra. It's my home forest. It's where I grew up. I grew up as a child running around those mountains, spending a lot of time in the Ansel Adams Wilderness. I hiked a lot of the peaks, Madera Peak, Sink Peak, Triple Divide Peak, Forester Peak. We climbed a lot of those mountains. Tried to climb Mount Ritter one time, but I was unsuccessful. My brother Greg was successful getting up there, but he was a much better mountaineer than I am, or ever was. But have a lot of background and time spent in the lakes up in that area. Have had a family cabin at Bayshore Meadows for a long time, and then just in 2021 was able to purchase my own cabin with Jill and in the Bayshore Meadows subdivision there. So I spent a lot of time in that area. I do live in Clovis. I am a Flatlander today. We moved down from the mountains back in like 2003 or 4 to help take care of Jill's mom, which we still do. And we've been city folk, if you will, ever since. I love the city of Clovis. I love the city of Fresno too. I love this area. I'm a big fan of what we have here. That's great. And but I just Clovis is my home. It's been a home for me for a long time. My grandparents, when I was a little boy, had a grocery store right next to Luna's Italian restaurant on Pulaski. There was a little when Luna's expanded their restaurant to the I guess be the south and made their dining area bigger. That area they took over was my grandparents' old store, old little tiny market and butcher shop there that my grandpa and grandma Joe and Jeannie Aiello ran. And so I spent a lot of time down there in the summertime, going to Clovis Rodeo, going to the parades. So I've been sort of a Clovis transplant going way back. I mean, Clovis and Bass Lake were my two, homes. And then obviously the high country of the Sierra was where I spent most of my time and developed my love for photography and running around the mountains, fishing, hiking, and all of that. So, okay, now enough of me. So let's get into what we've got here. So we're back to Range of Light. So Deanna Wolf, she creates this nonprofit organization. Her plan is basically to unite the parks, take the Sierra National Forest and turn it into a national monument. Basically, in a nutshell, and I sat in on the webinar last week. I've already shared a video on the Talk of the Hill Facebook page that broke that down in a briefing. I'll hit on that again a little bit right now, but basically Deanna is a person who I believe loves the mountains, loves the forest, and is a Bay Area person. I think she lives in Morgan Hill, and she just, I think, got frustrated with what she saw as a decline in the forest. Specifically post Creek Fire. She is an environmentalist. She is a Democrat. She is, and that's important. That'll be important here in a little bit when we get into the political divides of this issue, which I really, at the end of the day, I hope there aren't as many, but it's germane to the story to bring that up. And so she went on this, I call it a crusade. I think she probably would call it that too, but she went on this effort and crusade to start this idea, this concept of uniting the parks and taking the Sierra National Forest and turning it into a national monument called the Range of Light National Monument. Range of Light is a term that was coined by John Muir, the naturalist, world-famous naturalist, and so he referred to, I'm not exactly what year he first wrote that. I've read his books, but there was a passage in one of his books that mentioned Range of Light. It's the first time I ever heard the term, and he called it that because of the beautiful amount of light that reflects off the range at different times of the year and different times of the day. And so that's where we're at. Deanna was successful in getting some traction politically in 2022. I'm going to go to some notes here to make sure I've got this right for everybody. In 2022, she got Democratic Representative Jackie Spearer of California District 14 to introduce the bill, H.R. 9600, known as the Range of Light National Monument Act. It went before the House Natural Resources Committee and never emerged. So it died in a Republican-held House, and that was the end of that. It had enough, opposition to not even get out of committee. So I think she stayed vigilant, did Deanna, and now the planets have lined up to where we are now. Right now, we are approaching the end of the presidency of Joe Biden, and like a lot of presidents do when they leave office, especially historically Democrat presidents, they like to sign things into existence. And so what presidents have done going back to Teddy Roosevelt when the Antiquities Act was first established and he was the first president to use it, and forming Devil's Tower National Monument in Wyoming, it gave presidents the ability to use the Antiquities Act to establish national monuments, not parks. Those need congressional passage, but through a stipulation in the Antiquities Act, a president can proclaim and simply just sign the proclamation stating the existence or the creation of a national monument. And Joe Biden has already expanded 2 national monuments in California this year, San Gabriel Mountains and the Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monuments. There's a link on our Facebook page to go read the article from the Sierra Club that explains that, so go look for that. I posted it. And so that's where we're at. So the planets have lined up where Biden has already been on the record saying he wants to be the president known for protecting the most public lands in America ever. And so it's fair to assume that he will sign this. I'm in the camp that he will sign it. Even if we all throw a big fit about it, I think there's a good chance he still signs it. And so having that awareness that we're all now engaged in, this has been going on for a while. It kind of stayed under the radar of most people because most people are having most people who use the Sierra, and when you get into the restrictions we're going to talk about here in a second, if this does become a national monument, then that's what's got everybody fired up right now, including me. And so I still say keep calm and carry on right now, but we are going to get into the potential bad that could happen if things don't go the way we want them. And there's some people that do like the idea of this being a national monument, and we'll get into that too. But real quick, that's the background. Now, if I've done a little background, a little history search now. So Deanna sort of laid low after the bill died in the Natural Resources Committee in 22. She kept at it though, and then through some legislative help on the California state side, specifically with Assemblyman Joaquin Arambula of Fresno, who's up for re-election next week. He got on board with this idea of establishing a national monument. He's pretty chummy with the environmental left. He is a Democrat himself. And he got in front of this thing, got some signatures, 52 signatures of state legislators all signed on to this, which gave this thing some horsepower, I think, to get in front of Biden's guys, Biden's people at the White House. From what I understand, I don't have this verified, but from what I've heard, Biden's team has seen the proposal and have given some positive indications to the proponents of this monument that he'll either take a look at it or will sign it. Okay, so that's what we sort of know. On September 19th, Deanna Wolf held a in-person meeting at the library at Woodward Park in that area, the one on Perrin and Champlain, if you're familiar with those streets. And I think she had a pretty good turnout. Most of it was preaching to the choir. I think most of it were Sierra Clubbers and birders and people who think probably this is a great idea, who would like to see a limiting of off-highway vehicle use and for sure a complete cancellation of all logging operations in the area. They want loggers out of there and they want OHV people out of there. For sure. That's a big part of this. So they had a good turnout. None of us really heard about it. I will say Fresno Supervisor Nathan Magsig, who I'm going to have on the show tomorrow, he does a little podcast himself for Facebook. He's had Deanna on twice, I believe. I've watched part of one of them. And so, there's some out there that are picking on our local supervisors saying, well, we should have known about this sooner. And I can't argue with that. But to be fair to all the supervisors, Nathan Magsig has gone so far as to have her on, next to him in his office on kind of like a streaming podcast thing. So, and you could probably go find those on Nathan's Facebook page. But here we are now, and so last week I got a text or an email from someone who lives who has a cabin at Baysore Meadows up there. She sent me a note saying, "Hey, heads up! This webinar is coming up to talk about this national monument," and I had been hearing about it in the last couple weeks, and I started to poke around and ask about it quietly, and no one I spoke to really had any good information on it, and so then serendipitously, this email comes in. I open it up. I'm like, okay, this is a sign. I got to jump on this. So I registered for the webinar, and like some of you out there, we jumped on the webinar last week and sat in horror once it finally got started at what was being proposed. and done so in a way that I think was condescending. The way the speaker Deanna spoke down, I believe she kind of spoke down to all of us who live and work and play in this forest all the time, who have long family ties to it. The ashes of my father are in the Sierra National Forest that I visit once in a while, at an undisclosed location, and with no real monument there to signify it, because I didn't want to do that. But when you talk about having deep personal connections to this forest, I certainly do, because my dad took me into that forest when I was a little boy and showed me how to enjoy it. And so when he passed away, we put him there. And so, so we have deep connections like a lot of you do. We have generational cattle ranching families that are now in jeopardy of losing their permits and their way of life that goes back, generations, 5 generations in some cases. So we watched this webinar, and that's really where we kind of saw the hand being played. To me, and this is analysis, I don't have firsthand on this, but to me, and I've thought about it for a while, I feel like Deanna Wolf, I feel like she knows something we don't. I feel like she's almost taken a victory lap, kind of ahead of this. I feel like she knows Biden's going to sign this thing, because she's popping her head up and she's talking about this, and she's almost, in some of the communications I've seen with other members, she's just saying, hey, I just want you all to know where I'm coming from when this happens, sort of thing. So the tone and spirit in which she's communicating publicly and privately indicate to me that she's been led to believe or tipped off that Biden's going to sign this thing. That's Jeff Aiello's belief, right? I don't have that verified in any way, but that's what I think. Okay, and I could be wrong, and I am a lot. So get used to that. And if I'm wrong, I'll tell you, yep, I got that one wrong. But this is what I think right now, and that position could evolve, but that's what I think right now. Okay, so let's get into, that's where we're at. So then when we all saw that webinar last week, we all got engaged, we jumped on, and we put the word out to the Talk of the Hill Nation, and there are other pages, 4-wheel drive groups that are out there that are doing good work. There's a lot of people doing good work out there to try to build awareness of this thing. On that point, before I dive into the details of what could happen here, there are other Facebook pages. There are people within our own Facebook page that are doing their own thing to try to build awareness, and we applaud all of that and welcome all of that. I know I signed one petition that came up on Facebook from a trusted source of a person that I've met recently that works over at the Helms Project over near Wishon Lake. And so I did sign that petition. A lot of these Facebook petition requests look the same. I know there's one that a member of ours, Derek Anthony Dix, has put out that it has like 31,000 views, but only $3,000 raised. Or I'm sorry, 3,000 signatures. And so, and I think what might be turning people off, and this is sort of just to explain my experience with these Facebook pages, is that when you go in to sign the petition, that's all you want to do, right? You want to sign the petition, you click the button, you do your electronic signature. It then cues you for if you want to give a little money, and I think that turns people off, and they bail on the process of signing the petition. Just so we're clear, and I'll share my experience, I had that same experience. I looked into it really closely and decided to donate $25 to the organization that sort of is the engine behind the Facebook page. And when you do that, it's almost like boosting a post on Facebook. When you do that, they tell you that your $25 donation or your $1 donation or whatever it may be will help boost the post times X. So the more you give, the more people the post can actually reach. I bought along on that. I paid the 25 extra bucks to help expand the reach. You don't have to give any money. You can just sign. So just don't let the money part of that thing turn you off. But investigate it on your own, because I'm not sure how many of these different things are coming out. Unfortunately, in situations like this, people do try to prosper financially off these sort of situations. So be aware of that. Okay. All right. So let's dive in to the next part of the discussion here. And I'm going to try to go fast. I don't want this thing to ramble on. I'm known to be long-winded, and when a microphone's in front of me, talk a lot. And I'm going to try to mitigate that as much as possible. But what I want to do here next is I want to get into what we know, okay? And instead of conjecture, instead of guessing or letting our imaginations run wild, I want to get into what we know. And I figured the best way to do that would be to pull up HR 9600, the actual bill, the act, the Range of Light National Monument Act, and read every word of it, which I did today. And I've pulled some highlights out of that are germane to questions that a lot of you have that I've seen on the Talk of the Hill page. And we're going to address those right now. So, excuse me, I have some notes and I have some printed up material that I'm just going to read right from the text. First of all, we've already gone into, who introduced this and when it, went into committee and all of that. So to dive into some of the notes that I made, if this goes through, the National Monument Act, the Range of Light National Monument Act, if it goes through, these are some of the things we can expect and sort of timelines of how things happen. First of all, in the text of the act, the national forest land. So this right now, this is the Sierra National Forest. It's administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who oversees the Forest Service. And so the USDA is who's in charge of that. I don't have the secretary's name off the top of my head right now, who's the current secretary for USDA. I should. I don't have it. So if this goes through, all the Sierra National Forest lands go immediately to the National Park Service, okay, and the Department of Interior. So they'll go under the Secretary of the Interior, will be the new custodian of these lands, and they will fall under the National Park Service for management. There is a carve-out, the San Joaquin River Gorge that goes through the Sierra National Forest. So there's a section, obviously, of the national forest that is the San Joaquin River Gorge. Those lands are going to go to the Bureau of Land Management. So the San Joaquin River Gorge is going to go to BLM, and the rest of the national forest is going to go to the National Park Service for management purposes. After signing, the Secretary of after this act is signed, this is assuming it gets signed. After signing, the Secretary of the Interior, I'm going to move my microphone down just a little bit so I can look down and you can still hear me. After signing, the Secretary of the Interior has 1 year after this becomes enacted to submit final maps and legal descriptions of what the monument will be. And those have to be made to the public. So there's 1 year. Once the signature happens, there's the clock's ticking, and the Department of Interior has 1 year to produce maps and legal descriptions of how the monument will be used to all of us. Okay. Now, as it pertains to hunting, there's been a lot of questions about, well, can we still hunt? The Unite the Parks people are saying we can, but at the end of the day, the Unite the Parks people, they aren't writing the policy. They did, I think, help inspire what was written into the act, and that's what I'm referring to now. So what I'm referring to now isn't really anything but what was in the actual bill, okay? So the Department of Fish and Game, California Department of Fish and Game, will maintain control of fish and wildlife within the national monument, but the Secretary of Interior can override at any time and ban hunting and fishing if science dictates that it's necessary. Okay? So giant red flag, giant asterisk for me on that. There's a lot of people out there that have seen this movie before. So a environmental group will come in and say, hey, we're going to help get this thing turned into a monument. The monument then becomes a monument through the Antiquities Act signing of a president, and then the government writes up the rules. And when we're told this initially by the environmental group, we're told, hey, it's going to be okay. You're going to be able to keep your cabin. You're still going to fish. You're still going to hunt. You can still four-wheel drive in a street legal four-wheel drive or whatever it may be, and everything's going to be fine. And then later, when it actually starts to happen, it's not fine, and none of those things, happen. We can get pretty restrictive if you look at some national monuments that are out there. So that's the one on Department of Fish and Game and how hunting and fishing will work. Going on, commercial recreation stays the same according to the act. Fishing stays the same. They did make a delineation between fishing and hunting later in the text. So that tells me that they're looking at getting rid of hunting. If you, for instance, in Yosemite National Park, you cannot possess a firearm. You can't even have one on you. I don't even think even if you have a CCW, you can have a gun in the park. I could be wrong. I think the federal law overrides the county on that. But I could be wrong, and you gun experts will chime in on this. But you can't have a gun in Yosemite. You can't hunt with a gun in Yosemite. I don't believe you can possess a bow and arrow or a crossbow in Yosemite. So unless you plan on, building, a trap or going to throw a rock at a deer, it's going to be tough to hunt in the national monument. I believe if they create this. But they did address commercial recreation, so that's going to talk about China Peak and the Badger Pass ski resorts, I would imagine. Okay, when it gets to logging, this is the big one, obviously. The logging industry, for the most part, was killed in the 80s and early 90s in our area. We all know that. There still is some limited logging done. There are still timber sales that happen. The National Forest makes revenue off of those sales, and a lot of that, not just trees, but some vegetation is cleared. We've got a biomass plant in North Fork that's fed with that material. And so in the actual bill that was proposed, all timber contracts are terminated upon signing. So they've actually written this in such a way that doesn't even allow for the 1-year development of a plan. Once the president signs this, if the president signs this, all timber contracts at that time are terminated immediately. And so what they're trying to do is obviously kill logging completely. Now, I don't know for sure what that means for fuels reduction projects down the line should this become a monument. Certainly Yosemite does fuel reductions, and Yosemite does some logging. Sequoia, same. And so the National Park Service will be the decider on how that resource is managed at that point. But timber contracts, as we know them, are done. And the benefits that come along with those contracts and those activities are gone. And this obviously has a direct correlation to fire, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Mining is out, no more mining. And then what I'm going to do here is expand a little bit from my notes. So I've actually printed up the text from these parts of the act that I'm reading. So for forestry, I'm just going to read this right from the text of the bill. The Secretary shall prohibit the cutting, sale, harvest, or removal of timber and other vegetative material within the national monument for commercial purposes, commercial logging, and for biomass energy production. No part of the monument shall be considered suitable for timber production or calculation or provision for sustained yields of timber. The Secretary, meaning the Secretary of the Interior, may permit the cutting of timber in the national monument only in cases where the cutting of such timber is required to preserve and protect wildlife, the natural, scientific, scenic, or historical objects in the area. The Secretary may permit the removal of tree materials for personal use firewood, fuel wood, in cases where the removal does not harm the forest, wildlife, or the natural, scientific, or historical objects in the area. So there's a small carve-out in there for personal firewood cutting, but I wouldn't count on a lot of that. That's going to be heavily restricted, I believe. There are some groups out there, if you're going to do a little more research on your own, there are some groups out there that are part of the push to make this happen. There's a coalition called Nature for All Coalition. I would recommend you Google search these, look them up, do your own homework. Obviously, the Sierra Club is a big backer of this program, as is the National Park Conservation Association. So look those up and do what you will with that information. Let's talk about grazing. Okay, so we've got a lot of grazing that happens on the Sierra National Forest with permits that have been part of 2 families I know, and there's more families up there that have them. The text reads this way for grazing. Livestock grazing permits within the national monument where established or planned before the date of the enactment of this act shall be allowed to continue until the end of their permit period, but no longer than 10 years after the signing. So, subject to all applicable laws and regulations. Grazing permits shall not be reissued once expired, and they will be all retired. So what that's telling you is if you are a permit holder for grazing on the Sierra, if your permit has 3 years left on it, and Biden signs this, let's say he signs this, in January of next year or December of this year or whatever, you've got till the end of that permit, and then you're done. Let's say your permit has 11 years on it, and I don't know the time. I don't know how these permits work or how the block works. But no matter what, according to this text, after signing of this into an act by the president, 10 years out, nobody's grazing 10 years out. It's over at 10 years. So just understand that. And then there's some provisions in the text of the bill that talk about how to donate your grazing permit and leases, and you can read that for yourself, and I'll put a link up on where this is so you can go right to it and read it. Going down, let's talk about OHV. Let's talk about motorized and mechanized vehicles. Okay. Again, this is going to be another hot issue for a lot of us. I'm a side-by-side owner. I use it a lot in summer and in winter. It's interesting because for us that have private cabins, and we'll get into private land use, private ownership of homes and land in the monument, OHV is the only way we can get there in the wintertime with tracked vehicles. So there's no provision specifically for tracked vehicles in this, but I'll get to this right now. Motorized and mechanized vehicles. Here we go. The use of motorized and mechanized vehicles on lands within the national monument shall be permitted only on roads designated for their use. So that's boilerplate for they can change designations, and they're going to get into that. In the Sierra National Forest, all roads currently classified as Forest Service Maintenance Level 1 roads will be closed, and Maintenance Level 2 roads will be converted to Maintenance Level 1 roads indefinitely unless they lead to campgrounds, picnics, private end holdings, non-motorized trailheads, selected viewpoints, or are needed for administrative purposes or to respond to an emergency. Okay, so there's some interpretation, little golden nuggets in that one. But basically it's saying my interpretation of this is it's saying Forest Service Maintenance Level 1 roads will be closed, and if it's a Maintenance Level 2 road, it will become a Maintenance Level 1 road, which means it will be closed. So they're going to close 2 levels of roads. I've seen the map. We'll share the map. It's quite stunning how many of the roads up there in the Sierra National Forest they're going to close. They have some carve-outs for, I love this last one, unless administrative purposes or to respond to an emergency. So, one of the questions I can't wait to ask Deanna, and I hope we can in some sort of public forum or setting, but those fire roads up there provide fire break to a lot of the forests, or at least would slow fire in a lot of the forests. They're also used for access points to fight fire. Dozers can go in and take a road and expand on it, or jut another dozer line off of one of those to help stop fire. And so none of that was in the webinar really addressed. In fact, in the webinar, Wolf said she wanted to reforest the roads, meaning plant trees on all these roads that are going to be closed, because in her words, those roads are nothing different than a clear cut. Unbelievable. When managed by the National Park Service, this goes on, these roads shall be classified as paved, maintained dirt roads, or unmaintained dirt roads. Selected roads shall remain open, partially or fully, paved or dirt, in accordance with the Range of Light National Monument map, and shall remain open only to street legal vehicles. Okay, so that is that's description boilerplate, which is basically telling us that off-highway vehicles, side-by-sides, dirt bikes with no license plate or steel gas cans, turn signals and mirrors, all that kind of stuff, anything off-highway is out, done in the Sierra National Forest or in this monument. Closed roads may be remediated or converted to non-motorized trails and may remain available to non-motorized recreational use at the discretion of the Park Service and in accordance with the Visitor Service Plan, as detailed in subsection A. The existing roads and trails in the San Joaquin Gorge shall remain and shall be managed as is at the date of this enactment. So they're going to leave the BLM stuff alone, and the High Sierra stuff they're going to close, is basically what that tells you. And what they are going to leave open, they're going to leave open to non-motorized. So they're going to turn it into, they're going to leave some of the trails in place for mountain biking and I'm sure cross-country skiing. Those cross-country skiers, you can see their eyes roll when a snowmobile goes whizzing by on the same road. They're going to get rid of that. This goes on the motorized. This is about trails. A non-motorized trail system will be constructed and maintained using existing non-motorized trails and roads decommissioned from motorized use. Existing cabin leases. Nothing in this act shall preclude the renewal or continuation of valid leases for cabins, home sites, or similar structures on federally owned lands in the National Monument in effect on the date this law is enacted. Okay, so your leases, they say, are fine. Specific protections. The use of street-legal motorized vehicles in the National Monument shall be permitted only on existing roads designated for use by vehicles, again, by the Park Service. In recognition that certain conditions are deemed desirable for maintaining the rugged character of the National Monument, Congress declares its intention to retain selected dirt roads. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, no federal lands may be used for the construction of any new road or to pave any existing dirt road or to pave any partially paved dirt road in the National Monument. Roads that are deemed destructive to the natural landscape or harm wildlife and the values of the National Monument shall be closed at the discretion of the park. Okay? Private property access. This one is a short one, but it's important. In instances where roads have been closed to the public and those roads lead to private property, the private property owners shall retain the right to access their lands via the closed road. Pretty cut and dried. So, okay, let's get into, I'm going to have to get a better chair. We knew that. This chair sucks. My back's already yelling at me, but that's good because it keeps me going fast here. Okay, Section 8, acquisition of land. Okay, so this one says, subsection A, non-federal held land or interests in land within the boundaries of the National Monument may be acquired for management as part of the National Monument only by donation or purchase from a willing seller. So that one is good if you have a cabin, if you own a cabin up there in the mountains. And this one, pretty cut and dried, says that it can. The only way that the park can take your land or get your land is if you donate it or sell it. And then there's some more terminology in there about selling to the government at fair market value and all of that. We have a couple more pages to go, and then we'll be done. I'll do a little wrap up here. Tributaries. Okay, water rights are another big issue up here. Here's how they address the water rights and water issues for this proposed monument. Tributaries of the Kings River, the Merced River, the San Joaquin River. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, no federal lands may be used for the construction of any new dam or diversion or expansion of any existing dam or diversion or any tributary of, on any tributary of the Kings, Merced, San Joaquin Rivers and the south, middle, and north forks of the Merced, Kings, and San Joaquin Rivers. Boundaries in the National Monument. So this is a subsection C paragraph also telling us that there will be no dam construction. There will be no dam construction. There will be no dam construction on the monument once it becomes a monument. And that one's not that big of a shocker. I mean, we already can't build dams in California anyway, no matter where they are. So it's really hard to build dams in California. It's hard enough to expand them or make them taller so they can hold more water. Okay, the last page I'm going to go through here real quick. This refers to the visitors plan. So the National Park Service, once this enactment is signed, once the National Monument is signed into existence by the president, the Park Service will have 2 years to develop and implement a visitor plan. I'm going to go through this real quick. Contents: the visitor plan shall A, include a regular and adequate ranger patrol and staffing plan, which covers the remaining open roads and provides for people's management and resource protection to prevent human-caused wildfires. That one's interesting because, according to the webinar the other day, part of their plan is to take the overcrowding in Yosemite and sort of divert people, 2.7 million people to be exact, into this new monument. So you're going to take their hope is to take 2.7 million people and push them into Bayshore Road, North Fork up to Mammoth Pool Road, 168 into Huntington Lake and the Kaiser Road. So that's literally part of the plan, is to push almost 3 million people a year into the Sierra National Forest and hope that those pesky humans don't start any wildfires. But they're going to add adequate protection from that, according to subsection A. Subsection B, provide a plan for adequate disposal of trash and recycling of management and garbage removal, yada, yada, yada. Go to Yosemite to see how that's working out. C, manage dispersed camping to protect natural resources. So they tell us on one hand you can disperse camp still, like we can now in the forest, but they also tell us in subsection C that the plan needs to include management of dispersed camping and that they're going to cancel it if it seems like it hurts wildlife or in any way takes away from the recreational benefits of the area, which means they're going to get rid of it. D, maintain and manage all existing picnic areas and campgrounds to ensure that visitors have adequate developed sites for recreation. And I think that they'll keep a lot of those big sites. I think that's probably not a hard one. E, developed a non-motorized trail network and prepare a maintenance and management plan for front country and back country trails, and create and maintain trail maps, trails, and trail signs with a particular emphasis placed on trail interconnectivity. F, ensure adequate closure of roads and provide visitors signs indicating closures, and create a program for restoring the natural environment on closed roads and for developing trails on closed roads designed as non-motorized trails. So we already kind of covered what they're going to do there. Subsection G talks about interp signs for educational purposes. And H talks about opportunities to provide recreational, non-motorized trails. They're big on that, into the Bureau of Land Management areas. Nothing really shocking here. I printed it up for the first few, not these last ones, but I'm still going to look at them here real close. In developing the visitors plan, the Secretary should consult with the state and local agencies, NGOs, and tribes, and the public. In hiring, this is interesting, and they hit on this in the webinar the other day too. Subsection J of Section 3 of Contents. In hiring personnel, the Secretary shall prioritize hiring applicants formerly employed in jobs associated with commercial logging activities on public lands and biomass productions, and low-income applicants. So for the handful of people that are up there now with a logging job, you're going to be fired, but you're going to get priority in being hired by the National Park Service to plant trees on dirt roads. That's what they got for you. Okay, so that's what's going on with the text of the actual bill. So I hope that helps. Man, I got to tell you, this chair is killing me. I can't believe I own this thing. It's like a medieval torture chamber. All right. I'm looking through my notes here real quick. I did the rundown. I'm making sure I didn't forget anything as we wrap up episode 1 of Talk of the Hill podcast. Yeah, I think that's it. So we're going to have Nathan Magsig on. I don't know. We're going to have him on tomorrow. I'm going to tape it tomorrow. I don't know when I'm going to post it. We're going to try to establish a semi-regular schedule for these podcasts. They're going to be a lot more fun when I have a guest because, you don't want to sit and listen to me talk to the camera the whole time. And I love to listen to people, actually more than I love talking. So having some great guests is a big deal for me. Luckily, I have a great connectivity with so many interesting people that'll have a lot of voices. We're gonna, like I said before, we're gonna cover a lot of topics here. We're gonna talk about agriculture quite a bit on here. We're gonna talk about the interconnection between the Sierra Nevada mountains and agriculture on the valley floor. Water being the obvious link there. We'll talk about mountain issues. We'll talk about fire. We'll talk about fires when they're going. Hopefully that's not a lot. And so we'll just kind of take it from there. It's going to be a fun ride. We'll talk politics. And we've got a real big political week ahead of us, obviously, right? So we've got just a little over a week till the election. The election's going to be monumentally important anyway, but for this particular issue with the Range of Light National Monument, it plays big because there's a very good chance, I believe, Biden's going to sign this act. If Biden signs the act and Trump wins, then this is going to go away. Trump's going to either shrink it or just just reverse it. He's already done it before on a couple monuments in Utah. If Biden signs it and Harris wins, that's a lot more serious of a situation for all of us who are opposed to this happening. And then we'd have to get into seeing what happens with the makeup of the Congress. This would be a presidential decree or proclamation, and we'll all have to sit back and learn together the steps and the procedures for how that's fought on our behalf. Tom McClintock is our congressional representative in this particular matter. So reach out to his office, send a letter, send a phone call, pick up the phone call. You can find Tom McClintock's number. We'll put it up on our Talk of the Hill page. Contact your supervisors. I know Bobby McCauley is working on this. I know Nathan Magsig is working on this. That's one of the things I did when I did talk about. I did talk to Nathan Magsig 2 days ago. So Nathan, Bobby McCauley, and Mariposa supervisor. I'm going to say his name wrong. Miles McTinery, Minitre. Help me with that. I don't know the man. But apparently the three of them got together and wrote a letter that went to the president's desk today in opposition to this. So all that stuff helps. But having a loud and strong opposition to this plan is going to be really important. So sign those petitions. Share information, do your own research. I challenge, some of the things I'd like to know, and I'm going to do myself, and I challenge some of you to do this, is let's dive in and search other monuments that have been in such a close proximity to populated areas like this. A lot of the monuments I've been to across the country are pretty remote. They're beautiful, but there's just not a lot going on around them, so I think it made it easier for those to become monuments. With this proposal, one of the things that's kind of crazy is that it actually, in its boundaries, sort of in its fold, encompasses Bass Lake, North Fork, Shaver Lake, Huntington Lake, are all within the Sierra National Forest boundary. And so how does that work? I want to know that. I also think it's important, and I think this is an important point as I close up, for us to unify a message that speaks to the following point. National parks are good things. National monuments are good things. We're not opposed to those. In this case, what you're doing is you're taking a national forest and you're making it into one giant contiguous national park system in the Central Sierras, and you're eliminating a lot of the uses of national forest land that for generations people have become accustomed to, and I say have a right to. And so when you say you're not going to be able to take an OHV, an off-highway vehicle, from the northern boundary of Yosemite to the southern boundary of Sequoia National Park, that's a big chunk of the Central Sierra Nevada mountains, and to me, just systematically unfair. You're also going to limit a lot of the ways people use the forest, and so it's not a one-size-fits-all. For Deanna Wolf, who I hope watches this, I get that you like an intimate and wilderness experience that's that's really kind of found in wilderness areas. I get it. I enjoy those too. And that's why we have wilderness areas. So we can go to a place where there isn't motorized or mechanized systems. I don't necessarily want to see a barking dog on the trail when I'm in the middle of the backcountry. So that's why those animals are left out. While we do let pack animals in, they don't let cattle grazing in. So I get that. So and you like that, and I like that. But we shouldn't be making the entire outdoor experience that thing that we like. We should be considerate of other people who pay their taxes, who work hard, and their idea of fun is four-wheel driving on some dirt roads in the Sierras, man, with a bunch of their buddies, or airing down their tires and going on the snow up to Shut-Eye or to Chilkoot Lake or wherever they like to go. Go do it. I want to be able to put on tracks on my side-by-side and get to my cabin in the wintertime. I think it's fair and reasonable to say, as a point of contention on this, that we shouldn't homogenize the user experience for our wild lands to a very narrow scope. We should have lands where people can do lots of different types of things. And so I hope that resonates with folks on both sides of this. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. That's the end of I got Lulu barking at me too. I think that's my cue to get off. Just going to do a couple of promos real quick. Outside Beyond the Lens, for fans of that show, thank you for watching. We have been shooting a lot the last several months. Season 5 of Outside Beyond the Lens is going to drop in February on Valley PBS, and then nationally sometime after that in the spring. American Grown, I urge everybody to watch American Grown, our ag series. American Grown, My Job Depends on Ag is the complete title of the series. It airs Wednesday nights at 7:30 on Valley PBS. This Wednesday, we have another new episode, and it's called The Ranch and the Rodeo. And so if you love the Clovis Rodeo and you love rodeo action and you want to understand better how ranching and rodeo are combined or linked, watch that episode. We also feature in this episode one of the great cattle ranching families of the Central Sierra Nevada Mountains, the McDougals, and we spend some time on their permit up in the Central Sierra in eastern Madera County. So, and it's germane to this discussion right now because you'll see a little glimpse of kind of what that means to those folks. So watch that Wednesday at 7:30 on Valley PBS, or it'll be on YouTube after that. Yeah, that's it, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad I hope everybody enjoyed episode 1. I know it was a little boring. It was just me talking, but I just wanted to share this information. I think it's really important right now. To help, I always say information is comfort, right? And so right now there's a lot of people, I'm getting all the texts and getting all the private messages. Jeff, I'm losing sleep. What if this really goes through? What if this really happens? And so I say to you, arm yourself with information. I've tried to give you some more of that today. You can go find more on your own. Just search the bill. I'm going to put the link up to the actual bill so you can read the text yourself. I went over it pretty in depth just now. But stay positive, stay hopeful, stay active, and stay engaged in what this fight's all about. That's it for now. Episode 2 will be dropping sometime in the next few days with Supervisor Nathan Magsig talking more about the proposed Range of Light monument on the Sierra National Forest. Until then, have a good one, you guys. Bye.